The night was colder than she had ever felt before, and the wind carried a sharp bite that cut through her thin shawl. The alien city was alive with glowing signs and floating vehicles, but none of it brought warmth to her or the small child pressed tightly against her chest. Her arms ached from holding him, yet she dared not loosen her grip. His tiny body shivered with each gust of wind, and she could feel his trembling even through the fabric. Every step she took was heavy. The streets were crowded with strangers, some dressed in shimmering silks, others in armor that gleamed under the neon lights. None of them looked at her, and those who did quickly turned away, as if her very presence was a burden they did not wish to carry. She had knocked on doors earlier that day, pleading for shelter, offering to work for food, but each one had closed in her face. Her people had a word for her now, a word that cut deeper than the cold. Widow to them. It meant cursed, unwanted. A burden. No home wanted a widow, no matter how hard she tried to prove her worth. Her husband had been gone for months, taken by the war, and his family had thrown her out before the ashes of his funeral pyre had cooled. The child in her arms whimpered softly, his small fingers curling into her shawl. She pulled it tighter. Around them both, whispering words of comfort, she no longer believed herself. Snowflakes began to fall from the dark sky, swirling between the buildings. They clung to her hair, her eyelashes, melting into tiny drops that ran down her cheeks. Her feet were numb, the thin soles of her boots offering no protection against the icy ground. The city's bright colors felt mocking now, each shop and home glowing with warmth she could not reach. She passed a group of merchants laughing together beside a stall. Their arms were full of parcels, their pockets heavy with credits. They barely noticed her, except for one who muttered something under his breath, a word she did not need to understand to know it was cruel. She kept walking, forcing her chin up, though her eyes burned with unshed tears. Then she saw him, a human. He stood at the edge of the marketplace, tall and broad-shouldered, his heavy coat lined with fur. The humans were rare in this city, and most kept to themselves, avoiding the politics and prejudices of alien society. His gaze swept across the crowd until it landed on her. She froze, unsure why the look in his eyes felt different from all the others she had met that day. He did not turn away. Instead, stepped forward, boots crunching against the frozen ground. The closer he came, the more she could see the details, his hair damp from the falling snow. His hands tucked into thick gloves, the faint scar running along his jaw. She tightened her hold on her child, unsure if she should stay or move on. Human stopped a few steps away, his voice deep but calm. "Do you have anywhere to go tonight?" Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. No one had asked her that question in months. "No," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. His eyes flicked to the child, then back to her. "It's not safe out here, especially tonight. The temperature's dropping fast." She took a step back, instincts warning her. Her people told stories about humans dangerous, unpredictable, quick to take what they wanted. Yet this man was not reaching for her, not demanding anything. He was simply standing there, watching her, as if waiting for her to decide. "You can come with me," he said after a moment, his voice steady. "I have a fire going, food on the table. I'm not far from here." Her heart pounded in her chest. It sounded too good to be true, and she had learned the hard way that kindness often came with a hidden cost. But another gust of wind swept through the street, making her child cry out. His small face pressed into her shoulder for warmth. The human waited, his breath misting in the cold air. He did not push her, did not plead. He simply stood as if he knew the choice was hers alone to make. For a long moment, she looked at him, the stranger with the steady gaze, the stranger who did not turn away. Then her eyes moved to the snow-covered street ahead, a long, empty path that led only to more rejection. Her arms tightened around her child, and she took a single step toward him. The human did not move as she stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the snow like a silent invitation. The marketplace noise faded behind her, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat and the soft whimper of her child. She stopped just within reach of his voice, keeping enough distance to run, if she needed to, "You look frozen," he said, his tone gentle but carrying a weight that made her listen. "You need warmth now," she almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the word warmth had become something distant to her, like a dream from another life. "We'll be fine," she murmured, though even she did not believe it. He tilted his head, studying her in a way that was not cruel, not pitying, but searching like he was trying to see past the surface. "I don't think you will," he replied simply, then pulled one gloved hand from his coat pocket. It wasn't money he offered, wasn't food. It was his hand, palm open, steady against the drifting snow. Her breath caught. This was how trouble started. First the hand, then the debt, then the price. She knew how such offers ended among her own people. It was never in the favor of someone like her. "You don't even know me," she said, narrowing her eyes. His lips curved, not into a smile, but something close. "Maybe not. But I know what cold does to a child in weather like this. And I don't need to know your name to stop that from happening." Her child stirred against her chest, letting out a weak, tired cry. She rocked him gently, but the sound twisted her. "Stomach, what do you want in return?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. For a moment, the human only looked at her, snow collecting on his dark hair. "Nothing you're not willing to give." His words were simple, but they held a strange power. No demand. She glanced past him to the street beyond, where lights glowed in the distance. Warm lights, safe lights. The kind she had been walking toward for weeks, but could never reach. Her fingers tightened on her shawl. She thought about the doors slammed in her face, the voices telling her to move on. The nights spent curled around her child in dark alleys, hoping morning would come quickly. And then, before she could stop herself, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, strong. "Come on," he said, his voice softer now. "You've been cold long enough." As he led her away from the market, she realized something strange. Her fear had not left, but it had changed. It was no longer the fear of being alone in the dark. It was the fear of finding something she might not be able to let go. The door creaked open, and warm air wrapped around her like an unexpected embrace. She stepped inside slowly, her boots sinking into a thick woven rug. The scent of burning wood and something sweet drifted through the air, making her chest tighten. Memories of a home she no longer had flickered in her mind. The human closed the door behind them, shutting out the snow and the cold. He moved past her, his heavy coat brushing her shoulder, and knelt beside the fireplace. Flames danced across the logs, casting a golden light on the walls and filling the room with a gentle crackle. "Sit here," he said, pulling a sturdy chair closer to the fire. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the small room wooden shelves lined with jars. A table set with 2 plates, a faded blanket draped over the back of a couch. It felt lived in, but not crowded, as if it had been waiting for someone. She lowered herself into the chair, pulling her child into her lap. The moment the heat touched his face, he sighed, his small body relaxing against her. She loosened the shawl from around them, letting the warmth reach his skin. "You can rest," the human said from across the room. He was busy hanging his coat, shaking snow from his boots, moving with the ease of someone used to solitude, but he kept glancing at her, as if checking to make sure she was real. "I don't understand," she murmured, watching the fire. "Why help me?" He paused, leaning against the wall. "Because no one else did." The good answer was so simple, yet it settled in her heart like a weight. Her own people had looked away, and here was a stranger from another world, offering warmth. Without asking for anything first, the child stirred again, his tiny fingers brushing her cheek. She kissed his forehead, feeling the heat from the fire seep into her bones. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders loosened, the tension she carried starting to fade. The human stepped closer, placing a wooden mug on the small table beside. Her steam rose from it, carrying the scent of herbs and honey. "Drink," he said, his voice softer now. She wrapped her hands around the mug, the heat seeping into her palms. As she took a sip, the sweetness spread across her tongue, warming her from the inside. She closed her eyes for a moment, not wanting the feeling to end. When she opened them, he was still watching her, not with suspicion, not with desire, but with something else she couldn't name. something that made her heart beat uneven. The fire crackled louder, shadows shifting on the walls. She told herself she would only stay for the night, that she would leave before morning. But deep down, she already knew that when the sun rose, walking away might be harder than she imagined. The wind outside howled like a restless spirit, rattling the shutters as the snow piled higher against the door. Inside, the fire burned low, casting a soft amber glow across the small room. She sat, curled on the couch, her child asleep in her arms, wrapped in the thick blanket the human had given her. Across the room, he was moving quietly, adding another log to the fire. The light caught the edge of his face, tracing the lines of someone who had seen too much and spoken too little about it. "You should take the bed," he said, his voice low but firm. She looked up quickly. "And where will you sleep?" "Here," he replied, gesturing toward the chair by the fire. "I've done it before." Her first instinct was to refuse. Years of being told that every offer had a hidden cost made her wary, but the truth was her body ached. The thought of lying down somewhere warm was almost too much to resist. "I'll stay here," she murmured, adjusting her child. He stepped closer, kneeling in front of her. "You've been walking for days, haven't you?" Her lips parted, but she did not answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was enough. "Take the bed," he said again, softer now, "just for tonight." Something in his tone made it hard to argue. She rose slowly, her bare feet sinking into the rug, and followed him toward the small bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the sheets smelling faintly of cedar. She laid her child down first, tucking him in before sitting on the edge. The human handed her another blanket. His hand brushed hers for the briefest moment, and a strange heat passed through her, different from the fire's warmth. Something alive. She kept her gaze on the floor. "Why are you really doing this?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Because I remember what it's like to be alone on a cold night, wishing someone cared." The words caught her off guard, pulling at something deep inside her. She wanted to ask more, to know what kind of nights he had survived, but he stepped back toward the doorway. "Sleep well," he said quietly, and left the room, closing the door behind him. She lay down, listening to the soft creak of the floorboards as he returned to the fire. The warmth of the bed seeped into her tired body, but sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face in the firelight, and, for the first time in a long time, she wondered if she had found a place where the cold could no longer reach her. Morning light spilled through the small window, painting the wooden walls with a pale gold glow. She woke slowly, her child still asleep beside her, the bed warmer than she remembered it being when she had first laid down. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream, the fire, the human, the kindness, but then she heard the steady sound of hammering outside. She slipped from the bed, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, and stepped quietly to the window. There he was, sleeves rolled up, working on a broken door frame that hung loose on one side of a shed. His breath rose in white clouds, his hands moving with skill and purpose. Why was he doing this? She had seen plenty of men work hard for themselves, but this was different. The shed wasn't his shelter from the storm, it was where he kept his firewood, and now that he had taken her in, he needed more. He was working for both of them. She opened the door, the cold air rushing in. He looked up from his work, his eyes meeting hers, with that same steady calm from the night before. "You're awake," he said simply. "Did you sleep?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Better than I have in months." He smiled faintly, going back to his work. "Good, you'll need your strength." She stepped closer, her bare feet crunching against the frost. "Why are you doing this for me?" He paused, leaning on the hammer. "Because no one else would." The words were almost the same as the ones he'd spoken by the fire, but this time they felt heavier, like there was more behind them. "You don't even know me?" she said softly. "I know enough," he replied, meeting her gaze. "I know you're a mother. I know you've been left with nothing. And I know that if someone had helped me when I needed it, my life would have been different. So I'm doing for you what I wish someone had done for me." She felt something shift inside her, something that scared her. She'd been taught that humans were dangerous, selfish, untrustworthy. Yet this one spoke with a kind of honesty she had not heard from her own kind in years. Her child's cry drifted from the house, breaking the moment. She turned toward the sound, but before she could, "Step away," he added. "You can stay here as long as you need." "No conditions." She froze. No conditions. No payment. It was impossible, yet the sincerity in his voice made her believe it. She walked back inside slowly, her mind filled with questions she wasn't ready to ask. But one thing had become clear. This human was not what her people had told her he would be, and she was no longer sure if leaving would be as easy as she had planned. The days began to blend together, each one colder outside and warmer inside. She found herself falling into a quiet rhythm, fetching water from the well, mending a torn sleeve, preparing meals while her child played on the rug by the fire. It felt strange, almost dangerous, how icily she was beginning to fit into this place. The human never asked her to do any of it. She stayed in bed all day. He said nothing. If she burned the bread by accident, he only laughed and made another. And yet she wanted to help, wanted to make his home feel less empty. At night, they would sit across from each other, the fire painting shadows on their faces. Sometimes they talked about the weather, about the war that had taken so much from both of them, but often they just sat in silence. It's a kind that didn't feel heavy or awkward. She noticed things about him without meaning to. The way his hands were steady, even when he was tired. The way his eyes softened when her child laughed. The way he never locked the door, as if he trusted her completely. One evening, the snow tapped softly against the window. He returned from chopping wood, his coat dusted white. She handed him a bowl of hot stew, their fingers brushing. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Thank you," he said quietly. But there was something in his voice, something more than gratitude. She looked away quickly, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. She told herself it was just the cold making her feel this way, that warmth could trick the mind. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't just survival anymore. Later that night, lying beside her sleeping child, she stared at the ceiling and made a choice she didn't fully understand. She would stay not just because she had nowhere else to go, but because leaving now would feel like stepping back into a world that had already turned its back on her. And though she wouldn't say it out loud, she realized something else. She didn't want to go anywhere that he wasn't. The storm that night was the worst she had seen all winter. Wind roared through the valley, shaking the wooden walls, while snow fell so thick it turned the world outside into a white void. Yet inside, the fire burned strong, filling the room with a soft, golden light. She stood near the table, pouring tea into 2 cups, her hands steady despite the howl of the wind. The human was by the fire, sharpening a small blade, his movements slow and deliberate. When she placed the cup beside him, his eyes lifted to meet hers. And for a moment neither spoke. "You've done a lot for me," she said quietly, the words feeling heavier than she expected. He shook his head. "I didn't do anything special." She stepped closer, the warmth of the fire mixing with something else rising inside her. "You gave me a home when no one else would. You gave my child a chance to laugh again. That's not nothing." He looked away, setting the blade down. "I just did what anyone should do." Her chest tightened, not because of what he said, but because she knew it wasn't true. She had knocked on so many doors, heard so many voices tell her to move on, seen so many faces turn away. Anyone could have helped. Only he had. She placed her hand gently on his arm. He didn't pull away. The firelight flickered across his face, catching the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. "You gave me warmth," she whispered, "not just from the fire, but here." She touched her hand to her chest. For a moment he said nothing, just watched her with that steady gaze she had come to know. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand, his grip firm and warm. "You can stay," he said, his voice low but certain.
Ow.
"As long as you want, as long as you need." She smiled, not the small, cautious smile she had given before, but a real one. The kind she thought she had lost forever. She leaned forward, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside she no longer felt the cold. She had found her warmth, and it was something she would never let go of.